I welcome you again to our Management Science course. I am expecting library and information science students year 2 to be attending this online course. We are still moving on with our topic number 5, which is directing. And this time we are looking at the subtopic of motivation. And what exactly do we mean by motivation? Motivation is basically a psychological push towards action. Therefore, something inside you pushes you into action in order for you to achieve something or to satisfy a need or a want or to achieve a particular goal. As a manager, you must make sure that you create a conducive environment. This conducive environment will enable employees under you to satisfy not only their personal needs, but also to satisfy the needs of the organization. So these individuals not only satisfy their individual needs and wants as they work for your organization, but they in turn also achieve the goals of your organization. And that's the most important reason why you employed them. Therefore, you as a manager, you must be knowledgeable about what motivates these people, what energizes them into action. You must be knowledgeable about, for example, the theories of motivation, the techniques of motivation, and so on. So if you know that these people are energized by this, these people are interested in this, and so on and so forth, you'll be in position as a manager to build and embed motivating factors into the various roles that you assign your employees, these employees who are working for your organization. That's why it's important that you as a manager, you understand things that relate to motivation, you understand the theories, you understand the techniques, and you understand the various approaches. So this is basically why we need to study motivation in this topic of directing. Therefore, as a manager, you need to base on your knowledge of motivation to direct your employees and your subordinates and your workers who are working in your organization. You need to know what will motivate your employees, what normally motivates them towards action. And it is your duty as a manager to build a motivated team, a productive team of employees, so that they can work towards attaining the goals of your organization. If you remember in our chapter number 4, which was staffing, you remember that staff maintenance would require that the manager applies appropriate management styles, appropriate leadership styles that we've just looked at in leadership, in order to lead these employees properly and keep them working in the organization. We shouldn't forget that motivation is fueled by emotion, because it's emotions that normally determine an employee's willingness to work. Therefore, as managers, we must possess what we call emotional intelligence in order to manage our employees quite well. Now, there are various theories of motivation that have influenced how managers manage their employees. This they do in order to build a productive and motivated workforce. Now, some of the most common theories include Herzberg's two-factor theory of motivation, Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory, McClelland's needs theory of motivation, McGregor's theory X and theory Y, Vroom's expectancy theory of motivation, Porter and Lawler's effort versus expected reward theory of motivation, and the system and contingency theory of motivation. These are some of the theories that we are going to look at shortly and look at them in a little more detail. Now, starting with Herzberg's two-factor theory of motivation, the guy was known as Frederick Herzberg, who noted two factors two groups of factors that were capable of yielding feelings of dissatisfaction and satisfaction among employees, and these ones which were capable of yielding feelings of dissatisfaction, he named maintenance factors, or call them hygiene factors or dissatisfiers. Factors that yielded feelings of satisfaction among workers, he named them job content factors, or you may call them motivators or satisfiers. We need to note that hygiene factors are basically tied to the organization's environment, or they are influenced by physiological and physical conditions. Therefore, we talk of factors like the way the organization is administered, the job security an employee has, the pay that we get from our employers, our status where we work in relation to the job that we are working on, basically, and the various organizational policies. These are some of the factors that are basically hygiene factors. All these, however, they may be good, but even if they are good, they were found to be incapable of yielding feelings of satisfaction among employees, but they are noted to have potential for yielding feelings of dissatisfaction. So these are the hygiene factors, or the so-called maintenance factors, or you may call them dissatisfiers. Now, Herzberg and his team also looked at factors that are capable of yielding feelings of satisfaction among employees, and these include things like achievement, factors like achievement, self-actualization, factors like the advancement that we feel when we are working somewhere, factors like the kind of work we are working on should be challenging enough. If it is challenging enough, then that is motivating enough. Factors like the personal growth of the employee, as well as the acclaim and recognition the employee gets from fellow employees. All these factors are known to yield feelings of satisfaction. Now, Herzberg's team has, however, been criticized by some scholars in the sense that Herzberg's team seemed to have ignored factors like personality, which is known to motivate people. They ignored factors like the anticipated outcome of an individual's action, as well as factors like social connection and collaboration, where some scholars assert that no need of any sort can be satisfied without social connection and collaboration. However, Herzberg's theory is known to have helped to enrich job content factors, especially where we apply the job enrichment technique, as we shall look at it later, which is based on Herzberg's theory. And this technique helps managers to empower their employees in order to improve their sense of responsibility and increase their sense of authority over the job on which they are working, all of which are motivating enough to the employee. Let us now look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. Maslow came up with a theory that arranges human needs in form of a hierarchy. The hierarchy, if you look at it in form of a pyramid, from the bottom we begin with physiological needs. These are needs like food and water, and those physiological needs that a human being requires. Then next in the hierarchy security and safety needs, like needs for shelter, which Maslow considers the basic needs. Now, next in the hierarchy are the so-called higher order needs, which include the need for affiliation, the need for acceptance, the need for esteem, and the need for self-actualization. It is argued that when one need is satisfied, it ceases to be a motivator and less dominant. It is consequently replaced with another need in the hierarchy. For example, when a human being sorts out their physiological needs, automatically security and safety needs now become more dominant and they take over, and they are now the dominant motivators, and the needs that have been satisfied are no longer motivators. Now, Maslow's theory has though been contested on a number of grounds. Some critics have noted that no need can be satisfied without social connection or collaboration. Others have noted that satisfaction levels may not be the same for all individuals. Other critics have argued that needs may not strictly follow Maslow's hierarchy. Others have even noted that factors like self-efficacy may be responsible for motivating employees. Now, I basically want you to study more about Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory and how various scholars have critiqued it. But one of the things that you must note is that when you are a sensible manager, make sure that you take a situational approach and a contingency approach to the application of Maslow's theory or Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory when you want to apply it to motivate your employees. Now let us look at Douglas McGregor's theory of motivation. Douglas McGregor came up with Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X assumes that people have a dislike for work. McGregor assumes that employees are less committed to the organization's objectives if they belong to Theory X. Now, if you do not direct these kind of employees on what they're supposed to do, surely they wouldn't care much. In Theory X, individuals are assumed to be less concerned about participating in setting organizational goals and setting organizational objectives and participating in decision making. Theory X, on one hand, considers that employees would prefer being directed to getting them to work or to getting them to do some work. Theory X looks at employees as lacking the so-called internal self-motivation, so they have to be externally motivated through directing them, through threatening them and coercing or forcing them, pressing them to get to do some work. Theory Y, on the other hand, considers that employees look at work as something which is normal and natural. The Theory Y, employees do not need to be coerced or pressured to work, but they are self-driven individuals who seek responsibility and are ready to take on responsibility and to feel answerable for the outcome of their work, for the outcome of their actions. Theory Y employees also tend to like to participate in setting goals and to participate in making decisions, unlike the cases for Theory X employees. Theory Y employees therefore feel happier when there is free communication flow between their seniors and their subordinates, unlike the Theory X employees. So I want you to read more about McGregor's Theory X and Y and explore how various scholars have discussed this particular theory. Let us now look at McClelland's needs theory. David McClelland was one of the scholars at Harvard University in the United States. David identified 3 types of motivating needs, which include the need for power, the need for affiliation, and the need for achievement. Now, these needs would surely remind us of Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory in relation to the higher order needs. McClelland noted that some people would crave for power. They crave for power to enable them to have the ability to influence others and to change the course of events and to change things that come with your possession of power. And they may do anything to get that power. Now, the other need is the need for affiliation. People want to be affiliated to some group. They want to be affiliated to some institution. People want to belong somewhere and be accepted there. So people would be careful to maintain pleasant social relations so that they are accepted there, because the pain of being rejected may be so unbearable to them. People also need to achieve something in life, and so they are driven into action in a bid to achieve what they would prefer to achieve in life. And I want you to study more about McClelland's needs theory. What does McClelland say about the need for power, the need for affiliation, and the need for achievement? Cross-check various information sources in management science which are authoritative in order for you to expound your knowledge on McClelland's needs theory of motivation. Another scholar is Victor Vroom, who developed the expectancy theory of motivation. Vroom argues that the value a person attaches to the outcome of their action plays an important role in motivating that individual. If the value attached to the outcome of what the individual is meant to do is positive, it normally translates into a strong motivation to get the work done. However, if the value attached to the outcome of what the individual is meant to do is negative, then that surely would normally translate into weak motivation for the individual to get the work done. In other words, if the individual anticipates a negative reward from the work the individual is meant to do, it would imply that the individual would be weakly motivated. Otherwise, if the individual anticipates a positive reward from the work that individual is meant to do, it would imply that the individual shall be strongly motivated to get the job done. The other motivation theory is by Porter and Lawler. These two scholars made improvements on Vroom's motivation theory which they thought needed refining. They argued that motivation would not only depend on the value of the expected reward, as Vroom asserts, but would in addition also take into account the effort the individual would require to expend in order to get that reward. What effort will I need to expend in order to get that reward? I should ask myself as an employee before I'm motivated to work on what I'm supposed to do. Motivation would in addition depend on the probability of getting the expected reward, whereby if probability of getting the reward that I expect is high, then I would increase on my productivity and vice versa. So if employees expect to get what they need to get and that expectation is high, there are high expectations of getting what they are supposed to get, the probability of getting what they are supposed to get from the effort expended is high, then these individuals will increase on their productivity, and of course vice versa. What does this mean now for you as a manager? As a manager, make sure that you organize work very well. Remember, in topic number 3, we studied about the benefits of good organization, the benefits of organizing things well. And one of the benefits of good organization is clarifying the functions that we are supposed to do in each functional area. You clarify the roles and responsibilities for each particular individual. Where do the individuals see effort they need to expend? That one they should be able to see if you have organized the department, the unit very well. And each individual, maybe from the organizational chart, is able to see the responsibility you're supposed to carry out, which translates into the effort that you need to expend in order to get those things done. So as a manager, make sure that you organize your departments, your units and sections very well, so that employees can easily see the effort that they need to expend in getting various responsibilities successfully carried out. And this also implies for the manager that you must be honest enough in the rewards that you promise to your employees, so that workers are assured of a high probability of getting the anticipated reward. So I want you to read more about Porter and Lawler's effort versus expected reward theory of motivation. And remember, these are the two scholars who refined Vroom's expectancy theory, because Vroom's theory was not looking at the effort that an employee may require to put in order to get that reward. Vroom also didn't look at the probability, whether it is high or low, of getting the expected reward. Now let us look at other theories of motivation. There is theory Z, which was advanced by William Ouchi. That one is Japanese. Ouchi's theory is known to improve employee loyalty to the organization. The employee is, for example, given a job, and that job is like for life, and job security is assured and it is guaranteed, and there is a family-like feeling among the employees of the given organization. And in such organizations, there is a strong focus on staff welfare, and members of staff will not bother, staff turnover is basically minimized. There is also what we call theory A. This theory focuses on the innate abilities of the individual. You can call it innate potential for creativity. For example, if I have an inherent urge for creativity, that would be just enough to motivate me. Therefore, as a manager, you need to look out for such employees in your team who may require your support when they have such innate abilities. I want you also to read about not only theory Z, but also theory A. The other theory is the system and contingency theory of motivation, that argues that human motivation depends on the prevailing situation. That, for example, in order for people to get motivated, it may be contingent on their personality. That's where some scholars argue that human behavior should be looked at as a system where human personality and human motivation would probably be constituent parts of human behavior. I want you to read more about the system and contingency theory of motivation and get to understand better about it from authoritative sources. Now, let us look at approaches to motivation. Approaches to motivation may be derived from management styles or from leadership styles, as we noted them when we were studying leadership. Each management style or leadership style adopts an element of motivating your subordinates, adopts an element of motivating your followers, or basically motivating those under your span of control as a manager. So managers, on the one hand, who are bent on the scientific management school, tend to adopt the scientific management approach. If you remember, in topic number 1, we looked at the schools of management. And if you remember, Winslow Taylor, who is believed to be the father of scientific management, Taylor had suggested the piece rate pay system, which he believed was capable of motivating workers. As you may remember, this piece rate pay system was humanized by Henry Gantt, who suggested a bonus for exceptional work done by an employee and discouraging penalties as much as possible. Hopefully, managers would apply the behavior modification technique, but basically focusing on giving a bonus for exceptional work done by an employee and toning down on penalties. On the other hand, managers who believe more in the ideas of the neoclassical management school would focus more on human motivation. They would basically tend to adopt the participative management approach, where subordinates are allowed to participate in decision making, of course, which works very well with the democratic leadership style. Another approach to motivation is the paternalistic approach, where the manager, I'm very sure, basically subscribes to Theory Z. You remember, Theory Z was advanced by William Ouchi, as we have already noted. Now I want you to read more about approaches to motivation, the scientific management approach, the participative management approach, and the paternalistic approach from various sources of information and come to understand them better. Let us now look at motivation techniques. There are common motivation techniques that managers apply to motivate workers, to motivate their employees. These include the behavior modification technique, the carrot and stick technique, the job enrichment technique, the job enlargement, the participation, and the vertical loading techniques. Now, when we start with the behavior modification technique, in behavior modification, we apply positive and negative reinforcements, as they are known in psychology, to motivate workers. A negative reinforcement decreases the likelihood of an undesirable behavior to happen, and a positive reinforcement increases the likelihood of a desirable behavior to happen. So the manager may apply reinforcements, negative reinforcements and positive reinforcements, to control the behavior of employees. And when the manager applies these reinforcements, that's what we know as the behavior modification technique. There is also the carrot and stick motivation technique. This technique helps the manager to control employees by rewarding them or by penalizing them accordingly. The stick relates to penalties which are meted out by the manager, and the carrot relates to rewards which are given out by the manager. And employees are normally motivated by the anticipated rewards, and this is basically in line with Vroom's theory of motivation, if you remember, or in line with Porter and Lawler's theory of motivation. There is also what we know as the job enrichment technique. The job enrichment technique surely reminds us of Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory in relation to the higher order needs. It also reminds us of Hertzberg's theory of motivation, who talked about job content factors. It also reminds us of McClelland's needs theory of motivation. McClelland noted that people were motivated by need for power, need for affiliation, and need for achievement, as we saw earlier when we looked at theories of motivation. Therefore, as a manager, it's your duty to design the various jobs and make sure that within your job design you incorporate those elements that will enable employees to satisfy their higher order needs. There is also the job enlargement technique. In job enlargement, we add more tasks to a given job, and adding more tasks to a given job will make this job a little more interesting to the employee, and the employee will be motivated. You may, for example, split up the job into small tasks that are running in a sequence with the aim of making the job appear very straightforward and easy to learn, and the employee will require only a little training to learn how to do that job, which is basically motivating. There is also the participation technique. We've already noted that the neoclassical scholars have acknowledged worker participation in management as important. This also relates to one of the advantages of the democratic leadership style, where employees would show interest in the work with a high degree of morale. If you remember, when we are looking at the democratic leadership style, we noted in a democratic leadership, the managers there ensure that the employees participate in making decisions within the organization, and when employees note that they have been considered important, that one is enough to motivate them. There is also the vertical loading technique. This is also applied as a technique by some managers, where the manager redesigns the job in such a way that enables the employee to experience feelings of recognition, to experience feelings of responsibility, that the job the employee is working on is responsible enough. The employee now feels that they are achieving something, that there is growth somewhere, and all these are known to be very important in motivating workers. So I want you to read more about these motivation techniques that we have covered: the behavior modification technique, the carrot and stick technique, job enrichment, job enlargement, participation, and vertical loading techniques. Let us now look at managerial motivators. Managerial motivators are the common factors that motivate managers at various management levels within the organization, especially at executive level. One of these factors is the challenge that we find in a job. If you remember McClelland's theory of motivation, McClelland noted that managers normally would be motivated by work which is challenging, and not by work which is lousy or without any challenging aspect. Therefore, as a manager, you may use, for example, the job enrichment technique to ensure that you build into the managerial jobs within your organization a higher sense of challenge for the managers who will be managing these jobs. The other factor is competition. Competition is also known to be a motivating factor for managers. Very many managers would struggle to outcompete rivals, and they normally find it quite interesting and motivating to outcompete their rivals. So competition in the industry is also another factor that would motivate a manager. The other factor is the fear of losing your job as a manager, fear of losing the job, and fear of making mistakes and making errors that may lead you to lose your job. This one will be motivating enough to you as a manager to ensure that you do the right thing so that you don't lose your job. Managers normally prefer to be diligent and perfect in what they do, and would feel quite bad if a mistake was made, because they will always have to take the blame. The other factor is money with all its advantages and sometimes that money comes in form of benefits that accrue to a particular office that you are holding in an organization as a manager there. So money has also been noted to be an important factor in motivating these managers. Now, the desire or the urge for power, the desire for leadership within the organization is another factor that basically motivates leaders in an organization. The desire for power, desire for leadership. If you remember McClelland noted that power is one of the factors, is one of the motivating factors for people like managers, the desire to have power and the desire to lead others. This one is also noted as one of the managerial motivators. Now, the purpose of the job, has also been noted to be an important motivator. Very many managers would like to know how their jobs contribute to the overall attainment of the organizational strategies and goals. Well, this purpose of the job is the job aimed at contributing significantly to the attainment of the goals of the organization? Yes. If the answer is yes, that one will be motivating enough. Managers normally want to see what purpose their job serves, the overall strategic goals, the overall attainment of the strategic goals of the organization. Understanding the purpose of their job very well and how much it contributes to the attainment of the overall goals of the organization will be motivating enough to quite a number of executive managers. The responsibility and authority attached to the office of the manager that this manager holds, or to the job this manager is responsible for, is also important to motivate managers. You remember in topic number 3, we studied the process of delegation, and we noted that it is important to delegate the necessary authority and responsibility to an employee to ensure that assignments are well completed, because now with that authority, responsibility and the power that the manager has, the manager will have the power to make certain decisions, which in itself is quite motivating to this executive manager. So if you employ executive managers within your organization, ensure that you delegate to them the necessary power and authority and responsibility that will make them do their jobs happily and successfully. Now, the other motivator that has been noted to be important for these executive managers is the scope of the job. The scope of work is known to be the sum total of all the activities that have to be supervised by this manager, the activities that have to be overseen by this manager. That scope, when the manager looks at it, if the scope is manageable, then that will be a motivator. So when you employ these managers, make sure that you as the employer, you clarify the scope of work that they have to manage. If the scope is unmanageable, the manager whom you've employed will not be motivated. But if the scope is perceived to be manageable by this manager whom you've employed, then that will be motivating enough to this manager to accomplish the assignments that are given to him. So the scope of the job has also been noted to be an important managerial motivator. Now, the status that goes along with the job that you have given to that manager has also been noted to be important in motivating executive managers. Status also goes with the title of the office, that goes with that job. Those things have been noted to be important in motivating these managers. Interestingly, many executive managers would love to have their titles pinned on their office doors. This one is also motivating for these managers. So when they like it to have their titles pinned there, please do it as the employer, because you know this is motivating enough. Many managers want to be recognized in the organizations where they are working. So these titles, some of them consider them very important. So ensure that you recognize the status of the managers whom you have employed. The church has noted this very well, and when you see the church officials and their titles, yes, these things are motivating to them. Even in the army, when you look at the titles of these army ranks, these titles basically motivate these soldiers. So I want you to read more about managerial motivators, and there could be others that you may not have seen here, but we've noted here that common factors that motivate managers in an organization include the challenge that they find in a job, the competition in the industry. These managers prefer to outcompete others, the fear of losing their job, so they make sure they don't make any mistakes, they don't make errors, the money that comes along with the office they hold, and other financial emoluments, the power and leadership that they want to have in the organization also are motivating to these managers. The purpose of the job, to see whether it contributes very well to the attainment of the organizational goals. The responsibility and authority attached to the offices which they hold or to the job that they supervise are also important motivators. The scope of the job as well as the status that goes along with that job.